Okay, so here's where we're at. This is the prototype number, I forget the number, but this one was the one made out of firewood. So these are pieces of firewood that have been out in the yard for years as firewood. So they've been dried, not kiln dried, but air dried, right? Okay, so you saw the progress I made. Now the top is ash, some ash that I had laying around. Again, these are prototypes. So what I did was, I've got everything done. Last night, or let's put it this way. The last time you saw me in the video, I was varnishing this. I put in a coat of varnish on it. Well, I came in last night several times for a couple hours, and I've just come in. I would pour more varnish down these slots right here between the boards, because if I had planned on doing a two-part epoxy pour earlier, I would have put a long clamp going this direction and just snugged them up a lot tighter, and then I wouldn't have had this issue. But because of that, there's like a slot of a 64th or a 32nd of an inch, but that's enough that epoxy is just going to go down and down and just keep on going down to the newspaper. This is a waste of expensive epoxy, and it's a waste of time because it requires a lot of times an extra pour, you know. So what I wanted to do was, I did as much as I could, and you can do that with varnish, all right? So I just kind of back brushed it against the grain. It went down in. I came back with a heat gun, heated it to help it cure a little faster. Came back an hour later, did it again. I think I got most of it, but what I'm going to do is, just to be sure, this is the only side I'm going to pour. With that stuff, I'm not going to pour the other side. If you recall, I still left a clamp on here because I don't think I put enough glue in the dado, and I pulled the other clamps off too soon. You know, again, prototypes just tend to do those kinds of things, stupid things. But anyhow, in the interest of time, that's what I did. Well, when I did that, I heard a little pop, and it actually separated up here. There was some pressure. So in the meantime, what I did is then I applied, when it was open, that wound was open basically, I poured a bunch of Gorilla Glue down it. I let it drip, you know, I hung it up vertically, let it roll down in there for a while. And then I put the clamp on, and I did that overnight. Plus I got all the varnish on there now. And then I'm gonna leave it on though during the pour of the two-part epoxy, because epoxy is epoxy, and it'll actually help adhese and make all one this the flange to the board that came loose. I think after that, I think it'll probably stay put, no problem. And again, because it's in a prototype, it's kind of nice to, number one, learn from your mistakes. Number two is that if I had been I wouldn't have held back on the glue so much, let's put it that way, if it was a job for a client. So anyhow, I'm going to leave the clamp on. But in the meantime, what I am going to do is I am going to also put some blue tape on the back here on each of those joints. So there's a joint here, 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 and here. I'll put blue tape, and at least that way, it may be a little messy on the backside later, which this is the backside, but what I'll be able to do then is, at least it'll prevent that glue, or not the glue, for the epoxy, from soaking down. It'll go down into the seam and it'll fill itself, but at least it won't keep on running out, you know, and just going away. So anyhow, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get everything all prepped. Nothing fancy, just a table, a work table with some newspapers on it. Again, this is a prototype, so I'm not going through the normal procedures that I might use for a two-part epoxy pour. So if you notice some of those things, you know, keep in mind it's a prototype. And so I'm just doing things in a little faster motion, and I'm not as concerned about, you know, keeping everything perfect. So let me get that ready. All right, so I thought, again, since these are prototypes, I'm going to prototype more than just making the panels. I want to prototype something a little about using them, which is, I'm going to use some of these for demos of that patented system that I have. So what I wanted to do was see if I could make a core that would allow me to show how the threaded tenon, the GRKs and stuff go in there. So I'm going to get this drill press set up. So all I'm doing is just ballparking a location. I'm going to try to make a half a hole. Let's see, can I make more of a hole? Yeah, I could probably make more of a hole and it'll still show. I'm ballparking halfway. That's as close as it's going to get. I'm going to ballpark from there. Wouldn't you know it, it's not plugged in. All right, let there be power. I'm just going to ballpark the location and the depth. I think I have about a 3-inch bit on there, something like that. Because there are no screws, no nails, I never have to worry about working on these things with other tools. I don't want to go all the way through. Getting there. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to check that depth. I want to just come shy of making it through, but not all the way. That should do it. Yeah, that'll do it. So I've got the blue tape on both ends. I'm not going to go anywhere near that high. I'm going to have to double that one up. I see it got a little beat up, but blue tape on the ends to stop the flow from going over the edge. Again, this isn't that thick, so it wouldn't have hurt to just let it go. It's going to be thick in the middle parts on these depths, and of course, but it's going to be thick in that coal that I just carved too. Next, I'm going to pour the 2-part poly or 2-part epoxy. So again, if I was doing this for a client, I would be doing it a little bit different, but not all that much. But the preciseness of the mix is still critical no matter what. It's got to be right on, even. I probably would have used a larger container than the red solo cup that I'm using, because then I have more mixing space. This is going to be really tough to mix it in this glass. Either that or I should have used less stuff, but I'm making sure that I get an equal amount to come out of those cups. Otherwise, you can fill them equal, but then if you don't pour them till they're all completely basically done, then you haven't got an equal mix in the red thing. Again, this is going to be tough. I'm going to have to use another solo cup and do it that way. These are shot. I think this is the way that instructions say you should do it anyhow, is, this, using the 2-cup method. So I'm going to do that. I kind of looked at the clock. So I'll be doing this. I have a stick here somewhere that I'm going to mix it with, just that combination. But I'm going to leave it on the camera on fast motion because I don't want to get this stuff on an expensive camera. I'll catch up with you later. All right, so as you may have noticed, I spilled enough on those pour using the solo cups that I could have spent less money by just using a proper container. So that's what prototyping is about, you know, it really is. And it's like things that and then especially now since I'm recording this and the results of this, hopefully I go back and I look at these things and go, that's right, you know, don't do that. Okay, so that said, I did do the 5-minute thing on it. I kind of done this before, so I have a pretty good feel for when it's ready to go. You got to remember it's a chemical reaction. And then this is going to be the first coat, and I'm going to do it mainly, it's going to be to get that surface started. Now this thing also, remember, has at least 3 coats of varnish on it. It has more than that in those joints, and hopefully it stops. And what I didn't do, what I'm going to, is I'm going to flip it over. I almost forgot. And I am going to try to get the tape off of here. And I'll at least block those from going too far through. This should help. I'm just doing the joints. Okay, so I've got it taped on the other side. Again, my goal on this first one is to get into the deeper holes, because then it'll sit overnight. I definitely want to get into that cavity that I'm going to make, and I'm going to be putting it in there deeper than the directions probably say I should but it's just the way it's going to work on a prototype. So there we go. We're going to go with the pour. Okay, so I put it in that almost 3/8 of an inch deep, which is against the rules. Never been one to follow those. The other thing I wanted to make sure I got it in every single one of those joints, because those were otherwise going to be the culprits. And again, I think because I had put a lot of varnish in there through several coats last night of just those areas, let it drain through, harden, drain through, harden. And then that tape on the back, it kind of looks like maybe they're not going to ooze through. And then I wanted to get the deep cavities, and I also wanted to get this kind of stuff here, which is usually the culprit as far as the off-gassing goes on this kind of stuff here. And so again, I'm focusing only on the deep surfaces. I'm not worried about getting it on this up here. I put a little over here, but didn't really even need to do that. I could have waited. And it's not like you have to have a complete coverage on every one. And then the other thing I was careful to do was to not get it on the flanges, because once you get it up on there, well, it's going to be looking different from the flange. So all this whole process, if you've done this before, no big deal, you know what I'm doing. But if you haven't done this before, you're going to see me, I'm going to push the stuff towards the edge rather than brush it. That allows me to keep it control that it doesn't go up on the edge, okay? It doesn't go up onto the flange. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. Hopefully that, or I can speed it up later. And then I see I didn't put any up here where that joint is, and I'm gonna bring a little up. I'll put it there from the deep spots. I'm just gonna put it there, put it there, put it there, put it there, but I'm putting it about 1/4 inch away. Now it's going to self-level itself into that, but I'm going to help it along a little bit by going down there. I'll see if I can get the camera up close. So specifically, I'm looking at right here. The stuff ends right here, but there's a joint there, and what I'm doing is I'm just pushing it a little bit with the foam brush, but I'm staying about 1/8 of an inch back, wiggling it, and it'll just work its way into that crack then. And then that won't again become an off-gas issue later. And if it's going to run down into there somewhere, I'd rather have it run now so I can be suspicious later. So from now on, for a few minutes anyhow, it's just going to be moving this stuff around. So I've got every spot, every square inch covered. I've also was able to have enough to push at each edge, all the way along both edges. I'm watching these joints to see if it's continually going down, and it's not, which is good news. And so now it's really waiting maybe 5-10 minutes, and I can start to see the bubbles form. But I'll come back with you. You can just start to see. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up. There's some bubbles. So it's been a couple minutes. Lighting's not the best for videotaping, right? But I'll try to get a shot in there to give you an idea what the bubbles look like. Again, if you do this all the time, you can just bypass all this stuff. But you see the bubbles down in there. You see a couple of them, larger ones there. But you get those areas where there's a lot of tiny bubbles, and then you have your big bubbles. So all I'm going to do is just a tiny little bit, and that brings them to the surface. See that guy down in there? Just like that, they're gone. That's all it took. So I'm going to be doing that for the rest of the piece. And again, it's only going to be a few seconds, and it's going to be from a distance. I'm not going to blow it to make the stuff move. I'm just adding that heat to it. Specifically at the bubbles, I'm not covering too much the whole area. Just mainly focusing on the bubbles, the first run. And then in about 5-10 minutes from now, I'll take a look at it and do it again. So it really helps if you have a lot of light coming at an angle, not down, but at an angle. So like this time at night, evening, where the sun's kind of coming through there, I can look down. Again, the camera's picking up part of it, but if I look down, I see the reflection of the bubbles, and that really, really helps. So again, not light directly down, but light coming in from the side, or take a bulb and put it down at the other end, and it's amazing how much better you can see those bubbles. Okay, so from a two-part epoxy perspective, I'm really liking this. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it, but I think I might be calling it the micro panel. I was going to call it the micro beam, then it became the micro rail, but then they got bigger, and now it's becoming the micro panel, I think. We'll see. Anyhow, I like the concept from a lot of perspectives, but this particular one is this, and that is that it really makes it easy for pouring the two-part epoxy. And that's because you have your edge here, you have your edge here. The second one is where these blue tapes are. As long as I kept the overall width and the overall height of the panel within the capacity of the 12-inch D-wall sliding compound miter, which is about 11.5, 12 inches depending on the height. But as long as I keep it within that, well, I'm going to be able to actually cut off the ends. And so I don't have to, I'm going to have a really, if it works, I'm going to have a really perfect edge on both ends for butting up to the posts. And that's huge. If it's wider than that, it's more difficult, but then you're probably going to use a track saw, or you just try to get it perfect the first time, which is actually pretty difficult. But going back to the pour part, the epoxy pour, is that I'm able to pour up to the edge. The tape holds it from going overboard, but in the end, we're not going to see that edge in any, we're not even have to worry about the tape. It's going to be a done deal. Secondly, again, I have an automatic ridge all the way along here that holds everything in. Third is that because it's a dado and there's a tongue going into it, there's no place for the two-part epoxy to basically leak out. It just goes in and there's no space in there, and so you're not going through easily $30, $40, $50 of extra epoxy just because it's leaking out and ending up on the newspapers below it. So I'm really, really liking this. And I can do a thicker pour if I want. I could turn this over and do a pour on the other side. So far, I'm really liking this particular concept. So it's been about 45 minutes, which is a little too long, but I went in to have dinner and with our daughter, who we don't see all that often. So it's a little bit long on that window, but I do see a little bit of a bubble here, 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 here. Don't know if the camera is picking it up, but this is going to be pretty much the last round. And I don't want to touch the stuff because it's probably been on there for an hour and it's getting to that point where you really don't want to touch it to test it. You just want to let it be. So that's all that's going to happen right now. And again, it really helps to have that light coming in. And the camera, again, may not be picking this up, but I can with, and then I can focus on the bubbles, not on the whole thing. I don't want to disturb everything else.